On today's show, we're going to be talking about why contribution might not be the answer. Are they the answer to all of our problems? Or should we bin our contribution models and just go with the flow? I'm Luke Murphy, and I'm joined by my co host, Michelle Chin. We're both design advocates at zeroheight, the design system management platform, and this is Design Systems WTF. So, contribution. We covered this off in I think the last episode that went out. There might be one. There's probably going to be a couple in between these, but like the last official episode, non-live episode, because we're too busy jet setting around the world, pretending to be official. I was going to say
I'm
white
just
guys
trying
with
to
podcasts,
collect.
but we're not. Yeah.
I'm no, I maybe I'm trying to be. I'm just traveling the world just to collect frequent flyer miles.
Yep. It's the best
That's
way to do it.
my
It's it's the best way to do it. But contribution is such a big topic that I think it does warrant a couple of episodes on it. So last episode, do you want to give a recap of what we talked about?
Yeah, so the topic was around how governance isn't the problem for your lack of contribution. And we talked about how you can have a contribution model in place, but the lack of contributions really just people and their emotions and their unsure understanding of how they can really contribute, like setting those expectations. Maybe they think that the process is really difficult or challenging. And so they're just really reluctant to do that. And we talked about different ways people can contribute, like light, medium, heavy contributions, and stuff like that. So I think we, I think it was a good discussion about some options that you have. Um, but today is a little different.
Yeah, because we're just going to talk about whether contribution is worth doing at all. Uh, well, kind of ish, um, because it is a thorny area, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's not something that is. I think it's like there is this, and I think I for some reason, I have it in my mind that we did cover off Nathan Curtis's views on contribution models and the whole why federated is a bad idea, which we'll probably get into a bit more in this episode. But I do think that this is like a common feeling with folks especially when they're starting off their design system or they're in the early stages, um, or they're just being like, I don't know, the powers on high have just massively deprioritized and defunded their design system team. um, they think it's fine. We'll go to a federated model and we'll open up to contributions and everybody will contribute. Um, and that'll be fine because then that's how we're going to keep building our design system and keep it fresh and make sure that we're providing value. And are weirdly surprised that a build it and they will come model doesn't work 99% of the time.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's one of those things. It's like if it's everybody's problem, then it's nobody's problem.
Yeah. It's oh my god, that's
Sort of.
it's
I
I
think
think
it's one
that's
aspect.
but that is, it's like, I think that's my metric, and I think that is the crux of, like, why federated, I think most of the time doesn't work, or at least pure federated. So you have no centralized team, and that's what we mean when we say federated. Like, in the purest sense, it is that you don't have a dedicated team, you just have, uh, maybe like a guild or like a central, like, I don't know, committee of design systems folks and people contributing. Or even in the worst case, you don't. You just have like disparate contributions from all around the company, contributing into your design system, and you rely heavily on process or docs or governance to like try and maintain a level of quality or consistency. Um, yeah,
I think I think, like, it's interesting because I feel like you can do all of that, and then with that time you spent, you could have made the stuff for your design system.
yeah. It's like I think it is. Yeah, I do, and I think that's the thing. I feel like I'm repeating myself. I do think it's a fallacy, right? Like it's a fallacy that this is an effective way to work. I think it's like it's a way to work that has a lot of pitfalls and problems that are associated with it, because what it is, it's exactly what you said before. It comes down to the fact that one of the core reasons that federated doesn't work is because if it's nobody's number one priority, then it's not going to happen. Like if it's everybody's problem, it's nobody's problem kind of thing. Because the reality is that it's like expecting that on any product. It's like if you had like one central product squad that worked on 10 different products, all of those products are going to be equally shit. Like it's the whole, like, if you spread if you focus your energy and time into one problem space and one area and one like way of working, that is always usually going to produce better results than if you're like spreading thin across multiple things, right? um and more importantly, especially when it comes to saying like design systems, like internal tooling and internal infrastructure, um when we're working in businesses where everything is kind of driven by bottom line or like company goals, and design systems are ultimately like removed from those sort of end goals, it's never going to be top priority, and it's never going to be like it's basically treating it as a side project. um
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that's like the biggest problem because they expect it to be not a side project,
yeah,
but the reality is it is just a side project, and so then it gets really shoddily done,
yeah,
um, and then people get all frustrated.
yeah. So uh we won't spend the whole episode shitting on federated models, but it is pretty. So Nathan Curtis did a really good article recently. If you go onto Nathan's website, or just, I don't know, look him up on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find it. Um, but he basically, because Nathan did present years ago, presented like the different models and kind of presented them relatively equally, and probably gave federated models a little bit too much credence. And so he's written a new article that basically is like, from my learnings of working with design system teams, federated is crap and you shouldn't do it. Like, is the TLDR Luke summarized version. I feel like there needs to be a Luke AI to do summarized versions in my style of just this crap, this good. Anyway,
I'm like, summarized versions of, like, clean summarized versions or explicit summarized versions?
yeah.
Um,
The latter. Um, and yeah, and so basically talks about how federated are bad and that hybrid can work, but again, there are downfalls because it is again, it's around like how much you're relying on outside contribution to your design system, and the fact that like it's like hybrid works really well when you've got a good established design system that is embedded and has community around it and has like maturity and adoption. That's when like a hybrid model can work quite well. But it's one of those ones where it's like you need to do a lot of work to get there, and that work is probably better done by a centralized team.
yeah, like, I think that's the thing is, like, it's not so much about, like, why isn't contribution the answer ever? It's like, why isn't it the answer for right now? So and even if you do have federated intentions of, like, "Oh, we'll get a couple people from various squads to, like, work on it," that kind of becomes your, like, de facto centralized team to be able to get the basics in place to
Yeah,
then be more prepared to take on contributions. Because I think this probably matters more now than it did maybe, like, even, I don't know, 6 to 8 years ago. So, like, people have to know how to build components in Figma properly so they can be reused by people. Um and you didn't so much need to know that in previous tools, like, you can just make a button, and it's a rectangle with a text box, and you can just make
yeah,
sure it had, like, the right font, and people can copy and paste that, right? So, it was easier for people to, like, contribute, at scale, but then, yeah, for, like, the way things are now with the tools, it's like there's a lot that has to go into it that is better left to specific people kind of centralized on it, right?
yeah. And I think that this is the thing. Like, it's the fact that it's I think even back in the day, even when, design systems were first starting out and we started to talk about these things, started to build them, like there was a definite um mindset difference in design systems designers and engineers and product designers and product engineers. Um and it's around, I think a large part of it comes down to it's at least back then, a large part of it came down to motivation and what they're trying to achieve, which is why it's very hard sometimes to sell in the business value of design systems and hiring design systems folks, because it's like a lot of companies want to talk about efficiency and speed and all the rest of it, and it's like actually the reality is that if you do have a design system, there is a likelihood that actually it's going to take slightly longer. No, it's not a quick process to get those things established. And the building of new components has a lot of thought put into it to make sure that it is as um sustainable. Like the things that we're building, both from a components and from a patterns and from a base level point of view, is sustainable and won't need to be updated as much in the future, right? I mean, I think that that's always been the case, but now on top of that, as you said, we have added complexity in the way that we're building things. Like not only from from a design point of view, 100%, because it's not only what you were saying, setting up components in Figma is not a simple task. Like, I don't know, it's not that hard, but to do it well and
Yeah, to do it well so it scales
yeah,
well.
and to
Yeah.
make those decisions around flexibility, compare flexibility and trading off flexibility for um, I don't know, almost rigid extensibility. It's not the right words, but
Consistency, I don't
yeah,
know.
you kind of know, what I'm getting at. But then also layer on top of that things defining variables and actually having variable architecture and token architecture and being able to think about that in a holistic systems view of how everything goes together, as well as then things like accessibility considerations, usability considerations, um, and almost behavioral societal implications of what you're building and how your things will be used as well. Like these things are complex, and then on the code side as well, you've got the complexity of building things that are then going to be used in a way that fit within your systems and are like it's the same kind of things, are useful to developers so that they're not just creating their own stuff. Um and so I think that it's basically we're just going on a rant about the fact that you need to hire design systems people. Um but I do think that this kind of comes down to the whole contribution thing. Well, actually, I'm curious. If you were setting up a design, or if you were going into an early stage design system team now, how would you approach contribution?
I would set up a little tiny core team, just to get because I think that's the thing is, we always talked about how design systems are for consistency and, efficiency, but really, and we talked about stability just a little bit, but we never really articulated stability before. Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of always this undercurrent. So, getting the basics ready for the design system to grow, but also be very stable, right? So there's not like a lot of fluctuation and changes. And so kind of setting up those foundations, thinking about those the like token structure and that type of stuff early on and kind of getting to a good point and then slowly, building those components and then opening it up for contribution. I think that's the thing is it's definitely a slower process. It's not like you can hurry up and make a design system in a quarter and then can the team because you're like, "Oh, you made the kit. Thank you." Right? Like it's like this long process. So I would start small, but it would be focused people because I think that's the thing is when it's their job, like their actual focus for their quarter or what have you, they will do their job really well versus we talked about when it's federated, it's like, oh, well, if I get to it, it's a nice bonus, right? And so then you'll never have enough time or the time that you want to contribute to it. So um really getting just a couple people.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to to be fair, I actually think that I don't know, if it was me, like setting up I wouldn't consider setting up a contribution model until what I was saying, like until the point where it's like we actually have some level of adoption. Um, I think setting up community compared to contribution model is a different thing. So, one of the first things I do is set up like office hours and pulling in the people. Jesus, people who listen to this podcast are going to be sick of hearing me saying this, but pulling in people, getting their opinions, getting their feedback, and getting their inputs the same way that you would get inputs if you're a product squad. Um, but probably a little bit more because it's like it's actually no, it's the way that you would set up for users to be able to input into the product. Um, Especially if it's something like I think like B2B SaaS is like a great model for this in terms of like small God, I'm going out on a limb here. Um B2B SaaS, right? Idea being that, especially for like a lot of smaller niche companies, it's like you have a very small user base a lot of the time in the grand scheme of things. Like if you compare it to like B2C or whatever. B2C is like important. So if you're building like consumer apps or whatever, it's important to listen to your users. But, there is a point where, um, I don't know, like user suggestions for like product features or whatever is um it's pretty hard to like get a read when you have a mass consumer base. When you're dealing with like, if you only have a customer base of like hundreds or thousands of customers, um, then actually listening to your users and building the things for them is really important. And I think that it's kind of the same. It's actually on a much more micro level with design systems because it's like who are your users? It's your product teams. So it's like setting it up so that there is efficient sort of feedback processes in there and contribution in that way is actually really important of like this is breaking and so like constantly like surveying your users surveying the users of the system and like building up that level of feedback and contribution in that way which is not how we usually see contribution models, right? um
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Like contributions don't have to necessarily doesn't isn't a one-to-one match to say you must create a component in Figma, right? Like there are other ways to contribute.
yeah.
And I think having that feedback loop is really important. And I think that's like it sounds actually it's more realistic too, right? So um rather saying like if you want that component, you make it and then we can add it to the design system.
Well, yeah, and especially because it's like I don't know. I do think that there is a significant thought process that goes into it that is not in a core product designer's skill set. Um, or not even it's not even skill set. It is mindset. I think is the most important thing, and their framing. Like,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting. So Kelly has brought up in the chat that it's like their team struggles enough to get people to contribute to the components in Figma, but then there's also documentation, which is like nearly impossible if you have like loose contribution. I have a spicy take here. Um, the design system team are the ones who should be like owning that documentation wholly. And yes, like actually no, there can be contributions if there are willing contributors, but I don't think it's something that you should be pushing for contribution on, unless it's like feedback based. And I think a large part of this is because it's the same way that we talked about this in the Converge one, right? Where it's like getting AI to write your documentation. Um, the process of writing the documentation is actually one of the important steps in like building out the component because what you're kind of doing is like covering off all of the essential elements to like building out a component or pattern. um and I think that actually the it's like why get and I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's like something I don't know, something along the lines of like why get an intern to be responsible for writing like important company policies. It's like you get the expert to do those things. You don't get like somebody outside.
Randos.
Yeah, or like it's the reason why we don't have the sales team writing product specs. Um, that's not their expertise, and that's not their area of expertise, and it's not their job to write the documentation, um, and the documentation will probably suffer because of that.
Yeah, and I think the lines seem kind of blurred, especially like if you're working in product where you are creating like a component for the design system and you've brought this to the design system. It's almost like you can also you would be a subject matter expert on how like what needs to be documented, which because you know how the component works or the pattern works, which I can see, but also I think, it's kind of almost a special skill set, like you were saying, like, writing that documentation is hugely important. Um, so they might not, and I know, and I've worked with several designers who were like, I like pictures and I don't like words. Like they literally tell me that, which means that they just don't like writing. And I totally get
Yeah,
that. So I think it's almost like shepherding that contribution process and make sure like either like provide them with questions that they should answer or considerations or interview them and see if you can get some semblance of documentation on the component versus like just assuming that the onus is on them to do that because
yeah.
I think that's what's really challenging because some designers don't like words but
Yes, I know what you're getting at. I actually think that it's the I think this is the thing is I think it's actually part of the like core skills of design systems person, um to be willing to do documentation and interested in doing documentation. And I actually think that that's on, it's like one of the I'm a big fan of like everybody getting involved and providing as much context as possible in like all aspects. And so it's one of those things where it's like I'd say the same with like a design system engineer. If a design system engineer is like, no, 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 I just write code, I don't do documentation. That's for the content designer to do, or that's for the design system lead to do, or the design system product manager to do. Like, no, that's actually I think that's part of every, especially for like core design systems people. I do think documentation is like something that everybody should work on with their own sort of like part to give um like context to the whole kind of thing.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Whereas yeah, you wouldn't expect that from like a normal, not every product designer is like good at doing that. Again, it's like not every product designer is expected to write specs, or actually I don't know.
yeah like I
In
I
my
kind of
experience
like
they are.
so it's like, yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, so, like, back in the day when I was using, like, OmniGraffle to create wireframes, right? Like, I'm annotating wireframes and designs, like, there's a lot of documentation in that, and then when I switched to a different product team, they did not annotate
Mm,
anything.
yeah.
Like, it was just screens, and it was, like, a sequence of screens, and a lot of assumptions had to be made by engineers because there was no annotations, right? So, I wonder how many teams are not annotating their designs anymore.
Yeah, not many, and it's fine because AI can do it all for us, right? Um, I'd really like to go back and listen to myself talk about how I view AI and the concept of design systems over previous episodes because I've flip flopped a lot. And
I
I
mean, I
also
think,
I
we're
have to
we're
point out,
navigating the space.
yeah, and I have to point out as well because otherwise I'll get shouted at. That whole we should be writing the documentation, the AI shouldn't, was after a conversation with Amy Hoop and Scott Riley, and they were like, "Luke, you idiot! Don't get AI to write your documentation. We should be doing it, and this is why." And it made me go, "Oh, okay, you've changed my mind." Um, I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up. Kelly has a good one. Do you think that the term design system adds to the assumption that all designers can just handle that on their own as part of their job instead of a dedicated team? Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think we get into the whole design systems is a terrible, terrible name, and whoever came up with it needs to be put in the bin. But we're stuck with it. So I don't think that it's like a, well, we're stuck with it for now.
Yeah, until we can come up with a better one. Maybe that's a
So
contest.
yeah, well, no, I've had this discussion too many times. What's the better name for design systems? Because it's not just about design, which is true. Um, no, my view on this, again, something that I've been sharing more and more recently, is that I actually think design systems is going to die in the next, should die in the next 5 years. Um, but it's kind of like a design systems are dead, long live design systems situation. In that, I think that design systems, as they stand now, have been commodified too much. They've been treated as this single unit, when actually what we're talking about with design systems is a set of unified processes, toolings, workflows to make product development better, right? And to make it better, better quality, better experience for the users, behavioral and societal change, and efficiency and speed. Um, and I think that actually that like bucketing it under design systems is kind of like part of the problem that we have and why we have a hard time at like selling it in, because it is not something that is very clear. Um, I actually think we were kind of on the right track a few years ago when people started to refer to design systems as part of design ops. Um, and I'd kind of changed that to like it's product ops technically.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that in the same way that it's like DevOps is a thing, right? And it's like DevOps is a umbrella term, and in that you have a platform team, and I think that it's similar to like in the product teams. Like I could see a view that like we have like a platform team that handles all of the those interconnecting pieces that help us get where we need to get to, if that makes sense. We've lost Michelle, but that's fine.
I'm back. That was weird. Um,
No idea what happened there. But yeah, it's okay. You missed the end of my rant, but it was a good rant.
I'm sure it was. I will have to catch the recording.
I think that's all the time we have for today, though. Unless, wait, do you have any thoughts on that quickly before we wrap up?
I mean, I
Because
I
I
think
just
just really
monologued.
quickly, yeah, like design system, it's people just I think that there's that lack of clarity, right? So people don't know what it is, and so they just assume a designer can do it, but really no, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah,
Which is why you need those specialized people. I don't know, maybe I'll write like some brochures for people to pass out to their stakeholders. I'll make
yeah,
zines. I'll make zines
yeah.
again.
We'll
Um,
just it's political pamphlets internally. Um,
Propaganda.
yeah, we're getting back into that realm. Let's not.
Yeah,
Um,
we should probably end.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to suggest future topics or episodes or questions that we can cover off, then please do so by emailing us at community@zeroheight.com. You can get in touch with us on X. I'm at Lurkmoofy. Michelle is at Soy Sauce Chin. You can also join our Slack community as well, which is you can find at zeroheight.com/Slack. Uh, what else do I cover off in the outro? Who knows?
um, the next episode, which might be of interest, which is actually next week, is working in design systems a doomed effort?
Ooh. Okay, I can basically expand on my last point in that, so that's good.
Yes, exactly.
And we'll be recording that live from a small room in Copenhagen, which will be fun. We need to find the small room first. But it's no audience, just us. It just makes
Yeah,
it sound
and
exciting. It's just
specifically a
live.
small room.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But anyway, so yes, so see you next episode. It's been great. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks for joining.